It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Wednesday, April 24th. Your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is really interested to see how this Ivan Fedotov extension is going to go.
Oh, yeah.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We are at Locked On Flyers on Twitter, plus Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit fanduel.com/locked on to get started. We are on YouTube. We're on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Russ, yeah, that Ivan Fedotov contract, 2 years, 3.25 AAV. It hasn't been officially announced by the Flyers as of this recording, but it's been reported from several sources around the league and Flyers media. That is a contract that is a huge gamble, but I think it's one they had to make.
I would argue that, but it is a huge gamble. I would say it like this. So, just like in any business, when you have employees, you want to sort of be fair to everybody with their pay. So, what do you say to Sam Ersson now, who's played a lot more NHL games? Oh, well, this guy's older and he's put in his dues over in the KHL and whatever other reasons. I keep hearing all these other reasons why they may have paid him higher. But don't worry, Sam, you're still our guy, but he's making $2 million less a year. Hard to pull that off. Easy for us to say, well, we know Sam's mature and he's going to fall in line and blah, blah, blah. But as a person and a human being, you're not happy.
No, that is certainly true, and I think, like, comparing their 2 salaries, it's hard not to do it, right? Just given, what we know about how Urson stepped it up this year, we absolutely know that. All of that being said, I think Sam Ersson was also a gamble when they extended his contract,
Sure, but
and
a much more dollar friendly gamble. So
correct.
and you also had him in your system. So you had an idea of what he was like. Fedotov has not been in the Flyers system since he had been in rookie camp. So everything you're
Yeah.
seeing is just from afar.
Yeah, that's huge. Now, I think what this does is potentially bumps up what Sam Ersson is getting in his next contract to be higher than that. I think, it's absolutely unavoidable at this point, and I think it's warranted, again, based on everything that
Right.
Sam
So let's
Ersson
talk
has
about that
done.
because so you brought over Fedotov and you're hoping that, let's say you're hoping he's a 1B. Okay. But now you have artificially inflated Sam's next contract no matter what.
Mhm.
And for that
Yeah.
one, if he plays through most of a full season, it's going to be hard to get him on 2 years. Now he's an RFA, so they could force it and he could be like, okay, guys, like I'll do that. And then they could be in a position where nobody has a contract when, in the next 2 years, everybody's contract is up. And then they have to decide who they're going to sign. But then other guys have other opportunities, right? Then everybody's a free agent. So it's a big risk all around that part. But all I
Yep.
can tell you is it's easy to say, well, yeah, there'll be a competition in camp and everything. But if Sam wins and he plays 50, let's say he plays 50 games, but Fedotov really isn't the guy, well, then he's going to be playing 60 something games. And if he does that, his pay will be much higher than it would have been had you not had Fedotov in there. That's the other part of this gamble. And so that's one that I personally wouldn't have made. But that's, it's up to the Flyers. They had the money.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the issue, right? Is that Sam Ersson in the long run is still a little bit unknown. I think he's obviously more known than from last year, but I think given that he's ostensibly your number one goaltender, I think you have to give him at least 4 years and 4.5 minimum based on what Fedotov is getting paid.
Right. Right. So then everybody goes from, well, look, they're only paying 4.7 in net to now you're going to be paying, like 8.
7 to 8 million. Yeah. So I think that is going to be an interesting storyline to follow this summer. We're going to get into some of the cap stuff in a little bit, but I do want to mention we do pretty much know for sure now that Bryce Brodzinski is going to go into free agency and test the waters, and we'll see what happens. It's probably going to turn into a Wyatt Galnuk situation.
Yeah.
Where, he goes somewhere where he thinks he can get ice time. And I think that's perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, he's earned it. I mean, he was a fifth-year guy, so clearly, if the Flyers really wanted him, they could have signed him after, year 4.
Yeah.
But they didn't, so I don't blame him. And, now he'll have a chance to kinda go where he wants. Maybe he'll go where his brother is, maybe he'll go somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking at, some potential cap issues here, they've pretty much calculated, at least through Cap Friendly, what the penalties are going to be for this year in terms of cap overages. And
Mhm.
Flyers are one of 12 teams with a penalty going into next season, but their penalty is negligible at $245,000. So I'm not really worried about that per
No.
se, but what I am worried about is dead cap going into next season, and that will impact things like what a Sam Ersson contract could look like. And you look at all the dead cap that we have already on the books. So we still have the Kevin Hayes, 3.57 million. We still have the Tony DeAngelo at the 1.6 million. There's a giant question mark around Cal Peterson and what's going to happen there, and
Yep.
the penalty, like the cap hit for having him at the AHL level, is still 3.85 million, plus this 275 cap penalty. So just going into next season, we're up to upwards of $9.363 million. Now I understand the cap is going up, but that's still a lot of dead
Well,
cap
that's
space.
way more than what the cap's going up, that's for sure.
Exactly, and that's well before we consider any buyouts over the summer.
Right. So, I get it. I see what's out there. I see people on Twitter, they're like, "Well, if they're not really a contending team, who cares? They have the cap space." Part of that's true. The part that you don't want it is you're gonna lose the ability to weaponize cap space at the
Yes.
deadline next year, for which if the Flyers take a step back and you are actually in the top 10, you will want to get one of those top picks and, possibly, get another one. So they don't have 2 firsts for next year, right? So that might be the goal. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at next year's, but we could look it up. But the
Yeah.
point is you want to get as many picks as you can anyhow in next year's draft, just like any
Yeah, we
draft.
have we have 2 next
Okay.
year as well
So
because
there
we
are
have
2
the
next year.
Avs pick
How
in
many
the
seconds though?
Walker deal. We have 2. We got the second from the
Okay.
Ducks, as part of the GOTA.
Okay, so you got 2 firsts, 2 seconds. I still think you want even more picks than that if you can, just to be in a situation like the Coyotes were recent years where you can possibly trade those things around. But the point is, if you want to weaponize any cap space, or if you just want to do it to make a trade, like a hockey trade, then you got to have some cap space.
Yeah, I think it's the retained salary space that is the most important thing here, that to your point, uh, just being able to get assets by retaining salary is an important part of a rebuild process. And,
Yeah.
we see it, other teams do it. And I think the Flyers do need to be able to do that for one additional season. I don't know
Yeah.
beyond that,
No,
but
next year
for,
would be the one though. I mean, and
yeah,
there's some nice guys in that draft, but it's just like the more chances you got, the better. And that's what I'm getting at.
yeah. I just think that it also impacts the ability to do more buyouts over the summer that may be necessary. I mean, we've been having conversations about Cam Atkinson, and that would be a significant buyout.
Right.
We do have the potential of Johansson
Yep.
having to get bought out if the medical situation doesn't pan out to put him on LTIR like we
Right.
did with Ryan Ellis, and that buyout would be 1.33 million for 2 years. And we've already talked about the fact that we don't want any of this dead cap space going beyond next season, because that's
Yeah.
when everything else should be wiped off the ledger.
Yeah. And if Nick Delorier slowed down to the point where he's an AHLer, I think you only get $1 million off. So I think there's whatever the residual is, a half million, that's going to go against it too.
Yeah, absolutely. So lots more to come dealing with capology as we talk about the off season and what we would like the Flyers to be doing. But that's just your starter conversation
Right.
with dead cap space before we even talk about who we do want on the roster. Just a reminder, we have the AHL Calder Cup playoffs that start tonight. We did a big preview of the Phantoms versus Wilkes-Barre Scranton Pens on yesterday's show. So check that out if you haven't listened already. In the meantime, we have so many unsigned prospects in the Flyers systems that are not part of the Phantoms or Royals at this point. And we're going to talk about them and what their timelines could be coming up next. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. Again, I would keep riding the Knicks. I know it was a tough game for the Sixers, but this is just my feeling. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
The Locked On NFL Mock Draft is available now. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on Locked On NFL Draft to hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every team, with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. Locked On NFL Mock Draft available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. On tomorrow's show, we will be talking about draft eligible prospect Sam Dickinson for the London Knights in the OHL, along with kind of an overarching look at what the Flyers' strategy should be heading into draft season this year. So that should be a real fun one. Stay tuned for that. The Flyers' unsigned prospects that are in the system. Now, there's a few of them that we already know already what the situation is. So that's Matvei Michkov. We know we have another 2 years, though. We just talked about Bryce Prudzinski. Brian Zanetti has a contract in the Swiss League for next year already. And I think we'd pretty much written him off as
Yeah.
somebody who wasn't going to come over eventually. And then Matteo Mann, we saw signed the ECHL PTO this year with the Royals. I think he's going to start with the Royals next season.
Yes.
And we will go from there. But we have a whole other batch of guys, starting with the college guys. I think, one of the two top guys on our list right now is Devin Kaplan.
Yeah. So Devin Kaplan is progressing, but slowly. And so I understand why the Flyers may not want to sign him yet. That's fine. But next year, you kind of have to, that's your, time to do it or not do it. Part of it's up to him. Part of it's up to the Flyers. The him part is Can he break out of that mold of maybe just being a fourth liner? If he does, then I think they will sign him. If he does seem to be just a fourth liner, then I think it's going to be iffy because they do have other guys they could have in the fourth line in the future. So that's the conundrum, I think.
Yeah, and if you look at his numbers from this year, same number of points, but significantly fewer goals than he
Yeah,
had the previous year. Like the proportion of goals to assists is more on the assist side this year than it was. And so I do think this upcoming year is a make or break it. And there's just no reason for the Flyers to sign him this offseason. But
right.
next year, if he makes significant progress, that would be the time to do it.
Yeah, no doubt. I agree.
Alex Bump is the other main character in the college ranks right now. And we've been talking about him a lot this year because of his success. Danny Briere has mentioned him out of Western Michigan this year with 36 points in 38 games.
Yeah, really good year. I do think there's third line upside there. Skating still has to get a little better, but he's an overall good player with good hockey IQ.
Yeah, and that was just his first year at Western Michigan. So one more year for him there, I think
Yeah,
is probably, we'll see if he can maintain his pace from this year. But if they're going to sign him, I'm guessing it's going to be next off season. He'll
I
get
would
that
agree.
ELC on there. And then we have Cole Knuble, who had his first year at Notre Dame. That was a really good season for him, I would say, with 20 points in 36 games. Definitely needs more development, but I think this kid's on a good path.
Yeah, I think he's on a longer development path, kind of like what his dad was, and so I think you might even have to wait 2 years on him. But he's not going to have a million options out there, so I don't think it's that worrisome. So yeah, let's see what happens in the next year or two.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the tier goes down a little bit with the next couple of guys. We have Ryan McPherson, who played in the BCHL this year in Penticton with 38 points in 54 games. He is going to University of New Hampshire next year, I believe.
Hmm.
And so, there's opportunity for him to grow in the college game. But as a sixth rounder from last year, he has a lot more time to develop than some of the other kids.
Yeah, definitely some more runway. Someone like Patrick Sharp, who has experience being at New Hampshire, could probably get some good reports on him. So yeah, he's got a couple more years before they have to worry about him.
The other one that's, I think, pretty intriguing for a lot of people is Owen McLaughlin
Hmm.
because he's had 2 solid years at North Dakota and took a step forward this year with 39 points in 39 games for his sophomore year. And, that was significantly better than his previous year. He's a local kid from Pennsylvania. And, as a seventh rounder, I think a lot of people are rooting for him.
Yeah, I think Owen McLaughlin, you have to sign. Even if his numbers drop a little bit, I feel like the offense is there. He's just was going to be a project that had to get stronger.
Mhm.
We saw the offensive talent in the USHL. It's carried over into NCAA hockey. Uh, you know, on the zenith for him, there could be a second line waiting for him in the NHL, but third is probably reasonable. But I think he could do that. So I sign him.
Yeah, I think so too after one more year. So, I think that looking at the college guys, we should not see any more ELCs on that front this year, but a bunch in waiting for next off season, which I
Right.
think is really good timing in the rebuild.
Yeah, no, that's fine. In the scheme of things, it works out well.
So we have four non-college guys waiting in the wings. Alex Ciernik, I think there's been a lot of buzz about him, and he looked good at camp last summer, but I'm not sure with him, and his play in Sweden this past year. I don't think there was like a huge step forward for him overall.
Really, none at all. Because I'm with Elite Prospects, EP Ringside, and you know have I'm take part in all the scouting meetings. I've asked about him. I hear about him. It's not much. The speed's there. Nothing else has really come together yet for him. So he's a question mark. You wouldn't touch him right now.
Right. And Santeri Sulku, who was a seventh rounder in 2022, has had one more year than Alex under his belt and, had a pretty solid season in Finland in the junior league there. But, it's still kind of hard to tell with him. He needs more
Right.
time.
And that's the problem is, um, he's playing in a lower division and it's
Yeah.
Mestis and Mestis isn't great. So yeah, I'm not even thinking about signing him in the near future.
Yeah, I think, the guy that has the most potential maybe of these non-college guys is Carter Sotheran, who has played in the WHL for the Portland Winterhawks the last couple of seasons, and 40 points in 66 games as a defenseman, really strong. And Portland has been a really good training ground for a while now.
Yeah, no question. He's on track for me to sign him next year. And if I sign him, I then may have to hire you to start looking at the flow chart and spreadsheet for all these defensemen because you can't keep signing defensemen at the NHL level and expect any of these kids to crack the lineup. So at some point, there's going to be an overflow of these kids, but still, I have to sign them.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough to get them playing time, but you want a chance for all these guys to develop in your system and
Well,
give
I'll
them a
tell you,
fair
I'll make it
shot.
real easy. I mean, as far as at the AHL level, the Zamoliks, guys like that, Belpedios, those guys are just going to go.
Yep.
I wouldn't care.
That is what we are hoping for here for development reasons. And then one goaltender, Yegor Zavgarin, third rounder from last year's draft. I think the big question for me, because he was so successful this year at the lower levels over in Russia, is he going to get the bump to the KHL anytime soon?
Yeah, I think he will. I from what I could ascertain, and I was having a conversation, and Brad Allen from Hockey Prospect Radio, my old show, was saying that he may be the best guy in the Flyers system. And really, nobody's really talking about him, which is a shame because of all the other signings and guys being coming
Right.
over. So it could take 2 more years for him to come over, but he could be the best, and that's another reason why maybe the Flyers have all these 2-year contracts, but at some point, you know, you have to settle on some guys. You do.
Yeah, he's just been so strong with, in the VHL 943 save percentage and the MHL 945 save percentage. I
Yeah,
mean, that's a lot of potential right
it
there.
is. Oh, yeah. You can't ignore it.
All right. Well, stay tuned. It looks like most of these guys we're hoping to sign next year. So we'll keep an eye on their development and see how they do at camp this summer. Y'all have some questions that are pretty good. So we are going to get to them in our mailbag coming up next. The regular season may be over for the Flyers, but I want to remind you you could still win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey because with Sleeper you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. You can also play daily fantasy NFL, NBA, MLB, and college football, and entries can be made in under a minute. All you have to do is pick whether NHL superstars like Connor McDavid, Nikita Kucherov, or Nathan MacKinnon will record more or less than sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more in any given game. To win that 100 times bet on Sleeper, you have to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, you can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper, so start paying attention and nail those picks so you can start winning big. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL. You'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's Locked On NHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability.
When you're drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish you could handpick the best stars for your business team? If you're building your talent roster, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. Find top talent fast with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like matching, assessments, and virtual interviews. And hate waiting? Indeed's US data shows over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job. With Indeed matching as soon as you sponsor a post, you get a short list of quality candidates whose resume on Indeed match your job description. Boom. It's hiring at warp speed. And now with Indeed, you pay for quality applications that meet your hiring criteria. Visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application. Pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
So, getting to our listener mailbag, John sent us a message asking specifically about the Jeff Carter and Mike Richards issues from back in the day. We had talked about them when we mentioned Jeff Carter's retirement. And speaking of Flyers and ex-Flyers retiring, congrats to Jake Voracek
Yep.
on his retirement. Hopefully, we'll see him in the Flyers' future. But John wants to know about the full story here and what happened to make those guys get traded.
Well, I mean, you're going to have to look in places like Reddit or whatever because there's a lot of stuff and it's a lot of things that has not really become public. So I'm not going to be able to tell you that. I personally have no problem with Mike Richards. With Jeff Carter, I give you a quick story. When the Flyers were playing the outdoor game at Fenway, that's in the dead of winter. It's a cold, drafty stadium. We went and we were told by Zach Hill, we got a text, hey, interviews with the team are going to be at, like, I don't know, let's say 1 o'clock. So 1 o'clock, here we go. We all go down there, and it's quite a trek. Like for these baseball stadiums, especially the old ones. We finally get to the locker room. The first one we see is Jeff Carter, and he goes, "There's no interviews." So we all turn around, every reporter, we all walk out, and then like Zach Hill went up to me and said, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, Jeff Carter just told us there were no interviews." And Zach may have said something, and yeah, we went back in for interviews, and he was smiling and laughing, which isn't funny when it's like 25 degrees out, and you have to walk a certain distance. He found that funny, so that's my personal part that I could tell you about, and the other part I can't.
Yeah, there's definitely some of that behind the scenes stuff, but I'm glad that Mike Richards in particular is coming back into the fold and was there for the alumni game. That was such a wonderful experience. So glad we can put some of that behind us.
Yeah, me too. I never had a problem with Mike.
Yeah, at the very least. David wanted to know, related to our end of season evaluations, there seems to be a mismatch between Torts and Briere in a win at any cost versus a rebuild. How should Briere handle this?
He should handle it by having meetings right now and kind of letting him know what his plan is. Ask John what he's willing to deal with and come up with some sort of compromise, but let him make the full decision. Right now, the perception is that John's making a lot of decisions, and he does speak like a player personnel guy at times. So I think that kind of needs to get cleaned up.
Yeah, I think it needs to be clear that Briere is the GM and he's making the decisions on personnel. And, he will take input from John, but that's not going to be the end all and be all. Or they have to figure out some compromises that if John gets his way on one thing, then, Briere gets his way on pretty much everything else.
Right, because the funny thing is like a GM can't force a coach to play a player. We've seen this come up in different teams at different times, but it kind of can get ugly at times too. So you don't really want it to get to that point where the
Right.
GM puts a guy on the roster and the coach won't use him.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be an interesting summer.
Oh yeah.
Looking forward to all that. Mike had two really good draft questions. The first one, let's say by sheer luck, we win the lottery and get the number 2 pick of the draft. Who would you take? Who do you think the Flyers would take? And would you agree with them?
Well, I mean, I would have to take Demidov. He is the second best player in this draft. I can't worry about how many Russians I have, and if what they did with Fedotov really does help Russian relations, we'll see. I guess I don't know about that. but that's who I have to take because he's the best player there and a potential first line player. So I got to go with that. Would he match up well with Mitchkov? Maybe. I mean, that's something you find out in the future. But if they did, then you might have something like the old Red Wings. So that's where I'm going with it.
Yeah, I agree with you, especially because he can play center and he could match up with Michkov, to your point. And they've been prioritizing wanting a center. And they've said they want a center and secondarily, a defenseman. So I do think that's the right option there. And it seems like they're not afraid to take this many Russians and
Right.
they'll keep doing it. Like, I think this is definitely an option for them should the miracle of all miracles happen and the Flyers can move up. Mike's other question is, I know you take the best player available, but what is the chance a center is the best player available at 12? If so, who?
I mean, there is always a chance that a center is the best player available. I kind of have to think about this for a minute. I see, like, I like Sasha Bovera a lot. It would be a little
Mhm.
early for him, but he is going to be a true center. I like Michael Hagan. Maybe you take Michael Hagan at 12, but he wasn't invited to the U18 Worlds. It might be because he got into some fisticuffs recently, so maybe that's like they just couldn't do it. Uh, so I would say Hagan, Bovair. Uh, those are the two that I really think. I don't think Iginla will be there. If Iginla were there, sure. If Berkeley Catton were there, sure. But I'm not sure they're going to be there.
Right. I think again, of those two is more likely to be there, but I'm not sure he'll be there. I'm guessing he gets picked at like 10 or 11,
Yeah,
but
that's what I'm thinking.
yeah, but we'll see how that plays out. Our last question, based on several comments on YouTube, it kind of percolated up to this question: is there anyone on the team that reached their ceiling this year or close to it, and who is likely to take that step next season?
I think Tippett's really close to his ceiling. Um, as far as that next step, I believe it would be Joel Farabee or Morgan Frost if they have the chance. If they get played the right way and get the right, optimum playing time, I think they both could. So that's my answer for both.
Yeah, I would say Morgan Frost, given the situation he was in, did the absolute best he could do.
Oh yeah,
And so I think that, to your point, if he had been given better or more consistent opportunities, maybe he would have done better in the long run. But I do think, given everything, Morgan Frost had about as good of a season as he's ever going to have.
yeah, I agree.
All right, that will do it for today's show. Just a reminder, if you want to have your question answered on the show in the future, you can send them to us via Twitter at Locked On Flyers or email us at lockedonflyers@gmail or comment on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's now also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today available on the free Fire TV channels app